Super Rugby Power Rankings, folks. People have been asking for them. So here they are. Super Rugby last year was kind of a bit predictable. So at times the Bell Power Rankings didn't really feel that necessary. But this season, happily, I think has been less predictable, more interesting. I'm not just saying this as a Blues fan, seeing the Crusaders winless after 5 rounds, but genuinely there's been upsets every week, and I think that's good for the competition. So yeah, I've worked out some power rankings. If you're unfamiliar with the power rankings, the way I do them, I tend to give a little bit more reward for teams winning away, winning by big margins, and winning against strong teams. Less so for winning at home, less so for winning by small margins, and less so for winning against weak teams. That's the idea anyway. Not perfect. We'll go through them and you guys can let us know your thoughts. I gotta admit, when I first worked these out and saw the results, my initial reaction was like, what? See if you are with me on that. 12th spot, which I'm sure has never happened before on a Super Rugby Power Rankings, the Crusaders. They are none from 5, man. Where else are you going to put them? There's just no argument for having them anywhere else. They've got a new coach. They've got injured players. They've got a bunch of players who left. But nobody saw them losing their first 5 games. It's an unwanted record. Their next game is at home, but it's to the Chiefs. So one of the top sides, who are without D-Mac in their lineup though. So maybe it's a chance for the Crusaders to finally turn things around. That's a good thing about this year. You genuinely don't know for sure. Next is the Waratahs. And I feel like the power rankings have been a little bit hard on the Tars, because the Tars have lost a few games and I think could easily be a bit higher. But I guess you don't reward teams for losing. They are 10th on the actual table, so it's a little bit harder on them. They haven't won in a while. They've lost their last 3. They probably should have beaten the Highlanders. They are at home to the Rebels next, so it's a chance to get a win. But they are 1 win, 4 losses, which was not where they want to be. But the 1 win they had was over the Crusaders, so that was at least a bit of a morale-boosting one. But they should have had at least 1 or 2 more wins by now against the Highlanders with that final kick against the Drua Golden Point. So, yeah, maybe a bit harsh, I reckon. But that's what it is. And then the Force. The only reason I think the Force have come out above the Waratahs is one thing I forgot to mention, is we put more weighting on the recent results compared to the old results. So the Force's win in round 5 is worth more than the Tars win in round 2, if you know what I mean. So the Force have they got the same record, 1 win, 4 losses, but it's a recent win. And it was over a pretty decent team as well in the Reds. The Reds were coming in to Perth kind of, on a bit of a high, but the Force managed to get a good win over them. So they're away to the Drua next. That's a far cry from playing at home in Perth, but we'll see how they go. Next row, we got the Rebels. Rebels, I wasn't sure if this is harsh or not, because the Rebels are really up and down. Even though we're only 5 rounds in, they've had some decent results, and they've had, they got a bit of a hiding in their last game anyway. So, yeah, maybe it's a little bit harsh on them because it's a bunch of teams. There's 4 teams with a kind of 2 win, 3 loss record, of which the Rebels are 1. But I guess maybe partly they are the only team who genuinely had a home game in round 2, whereas everyone else was at a neutral venue, so we scored them a little bit lower for that one. But, yeah, we'll see how the Rebels go in their game up against the Tars. Next is the Highlanders. How convincing have the Highlanders been? Not that convincing, but also they've showed a fair bit of promise. It's been a bit of a mixed bag. Like, they scraped by the Tars, but then they've pushed in other games as well. So I feel like there's still a bit of optimism where the Landers are going to go. But that being said, they have lost both their most recent games. They are 6th on the log, so this is being a bit harsher on them. But like I said, if we're looking at the most recent results, the most recent results are 2 losses. Next is Moana Pacifica, who were perennially in that bottom spot last year. So good to see them in a better spot. They are 2 wins and 3 losses, just like the Rebels, just like the Highlanders. Their last result was certainly a bit of a disappointing one where they actually got put to the sword. But kind of like the Highlanders, it feels like they're a step above last year, which is much needed. Like last year, there were a few teams at the top, the Chiefs, the Crusaders, the Blues, from memory, that was just streets above everybody else. It doesn't feel quite like that this year. So nobody expected them to go to Perth and really get as comfortable a win as they did, even though the Force haven't been that strong. you wouldn't have backed Moana Pacifica to travel all that way and then come out with a big result, but they did it this year. So, yeah. They're at home, technically, to the Blues in their next game, but it's at Eden Park. So, yeah. Not much of a home game, realistically. The Drua are here in 6th. The Drua are also on that 2-win, 3-loss record, but they've won 2 of their last 3, which is at least with a bit of recency waiting, a kind of shot in their arm. They are only 8th on the actual log. They started the campaign, I guess, a little bit flat, but it's just going to be about making Fiji a fortress, I would imagine, for the Drua boys. If they win all their home games, then they should be in with a shout because, most of the teams make the playoffs in Super Rugby. So you'd have to put the Drua in that conversation. The Reds have genuinely been one of the biggest improvements. As I said, they'll be disappointed with their most recent game up against the Force, where they were expected to do well. They kind of fluffed their lines on that one, but I mean, you've got to give credit to the Force for putting that big lead on them. But yeah, the Reds are looking night and day different from last year. The back row, Siruuru in the second row have just been phenomenal. So yeah, really, really pleasing. They look like they could knock off anybody on their day, and they've got a big game up against the Brumbies next, which is going to be a fascinating one. And then my Blues, not quite in the top row. Blues in 4th spot. They look good, but they don't quite look, to me anyway, as I say this kind of cautiously, I don't think they look Hurricanes or Chiefs good just yet. We'll kind of have to wait and see how the Blues go out the rest of the kind of campaign. They did lose to the Hurricanes when they went down there and played them. So, yeah, it doesn't quite feel like they're there yet, but we're still, first half of the season, so we'll kind of have to wait and see. Away game, as I mentioned, to Moana Pacifica next. Interestingly, the Chiefs have come in 3rd. This is one that had me kind of spitting my coffee. It's like, how the hell are the Chiefs not 2nd? Because in my mind, the Chiefs are 2nd, but they've come out ever so slightly behind one of the other sides. You can probably guess who it is. They did have that round 3 loss to the Reds, which is their only loss thus far. Otherwise, they've been pretty impressive. I guess they were run closer than we thought they might have been against the Highlanders last week. They had that game pretty much covered and then just kind of scraped by. So maybe there is a little bit of a, I don't want to say a concern, but you know what I mean? Like they're still maybe not quite at that level that my brain seems to think they're at. Brumbies, other side that I expected to be in 3rd, but I got them in 2nd. Their loss was in round 2. It was to the Chiefs. Maybe that's why my brain tells me the Chiefs should be ahead of the Brumbies, because head-to-head, the Chiefs beat them. But the Brumbies have won more games recently, and they seem to be getting better. Like the Brumbies started the season pretty slowly, but fingers crossed for the Aussie sides, and just for the competition, to have some good competitive teams. They're looking pretty good. And they're away to the Reds, which is going to be a real ding-dong battle. No doubt who's number 1, though. Hurricanes, only unbeaten side. And they're able to just change up their whole bloody team. Like, when they played the Rebels, they literally changed more than half the team and still flogged them. They're going to change their whole team again for this week's game against the Highlanders. So, really, really interesting times. You guys let us know your thoughts on the power rankings. Like I said, I feel like the Tars have been a bit hard done by. And I felt like the Chiefs have been a bit hard done by. But I can kind of see why things maybe have come out the way they are. Certainly similar to the log, but a few differences. Obviously, it's also still really early on in the competition. So getting 1 win when you've only played like 5 games is going to be a pretty sizable chunk of the percentage of your season. So the more games we get in, hopefully the power rankings will go a bit more stable. But that's the first one. Backed by popular demand. Power rankings for Super Rugby. We'll keep on with them throughout the season. You guys let us know your thoughts. And I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.